Hello. We are continuing our reading about the Punic Wars in history. Last time that we had a video, we talked a little bit about the First Punic War. Today we're going to continue with that, and we're going to first start by talking about Hannibal. And we actually read about him a little bit last time. I'm going to reread this, and we're going to read about the rest of the Punic Wars. Okay, so if y'all could just follow along with me on the screen. Okay, so this is Hannibal. At the end of the First Punic War, a young Carthaginian boy named Hannibal waited for his father to return from battle. His father was an important leader in the Carthaginian army. Hannibal wanted to be a soldier like his father. More than anything, he wanted to fight against the Romans. When Hannibal's father returned, he became commander of Carthage's army. He then conquered the rich lands along the northwest coast of the Mediterranean. Today, this area is called Spain. When he was 9 years old, Hannibal went to Spain with his father and the army. Hannibal grew to be an excellent soldier like his father. When he was 26 years old, Hannibal took command of the Carthaginian army. Hannibal was a great general. He was brave and clever in battle. He treated his men fairly and earned their respect and loyalty. Okay, so that's a little bit about Hannibal. Let's talk about him. First of all, who was Hannibal? Hannibal was the son of the commander of the Carthaginian army. He became a soldier and eventually took control of Carthage's army. Okay, that's who Hannibal was. Let's go ahead and continue reading on about the Second Punic War. And this is going to tell us a little bit more about Hannibal as well. Hannibal still wanted to fight Rome. In 219 BCE, he attacked a town that was friendly with Rome. This attack started the Second Punic War. Next, Hannibal decided to march his army from Spain to Italy. This meant crossing the wide rivers and the tall snow-covered mountains known as the Alps. It would be hard for the soldiers to cross these rivers and mountains. Hannibal also had to get thousands of horses. Okay, so this shows the route that Hannibal took from Spain to Italy. Okay, this red line, you can see it on here. It's quite a long trek. Okay, he took his army all the way from Spain into Italy. He crossed the tall snow-covered mountains, and it would be hard for the soldiers and horses to get across these rivers and mountains. Hannibal also had to get dozens of elephants across these barriers. A barrier is something that is in the way. The Carthaginian army used African elephants in battle. Most of their enemies in Europe had never seen elephants and were terrified by them. The Romans thought that no army would ever be able to cross the rugged Alps. They were wrong. The Carthaginians made it over the Alps and onto the Italian peninsula. The crossing took 15 hard days, and Hannibal lost almost half of his men. Hannibal fought the Romans on the Italian peninsula for the next 16 years. He won great battles, but the Romans would not give up. Eventually, the Romans sent an army to attack Carthage. Hannibal rushed home. Outside Carthage, Hannibal met a Roman army led by General Scipio Africanus. The Roman army won the battle. Carthage surrendered, but Hannibal continued to fight. He moved from place to place, staying away from the Romans. When the Romans finally trapped him, Hannibal refused to surrender. Instead, he killed himself. Okay, so that's a lot of information about the Second Punic War. So let's talk about it a little bit. Why do you think the Romans felt protected by the Alps? Remember, the Alps were those big mountains. Why do you think they felt protected? They thought that no army would be able to cross the mountains because they were so hard to cross. So they thought they were protected by those mountains, but wasn't the case with Hannibal's army. Do you think Hannibal made the right decision by leading his army across the Alps? Think about that. He led his army across the Alps, and they made it, but he also lost many men. Do you think he made the right decision? So you could say yes, because he was able to take the Romans by surprise. Or you could also say no, because Hannibal lost almost half of his army, okay? And he still was not able to defeat the Romans. So what event led to the end of the Second Punic War? Okay, the event that led to the end of the Second Punic War is that the Roman army attacked Carthage. The Roman general Scipio Africanus defeated Hannibal outside of Carthage. That's how the end of the Second Punic War came about. Knowing that the city of Carthage surrendered, but that Hannibal did not, why do you think that he refused to surrender? One reason that he probably refused to surrender is that he hated the Romans and he was too proud to surrender. He still thought that he could win. Okay, so let's read this last little section about the Third Punic War. And this is the final Punic War. After the Second Punic War, Rome and Carthage were at peace for more than 50 years. Then in 149 BCE, the Third Punic War began. The Romans sent a huge army to Africa. The fighting lasted only 3 years, so not as long as the First and the Second Punic War. In the end, the Romans destroyed the city of Carthage. The Carthaginians who were not killed were enslaved. Okay, so what happened in the Third Punic War? The Romans sent an army to Africa, and then after 3 years of fighting, they won. They defeated Carthage and destroyed the city of Carthage. Why do you think the Third Punic War was the last Punic War? Why were there not more? So, thinking about this, there really was no enemy left to fight. The Romans destroyed the city, and they enslaved all the Carthaginians who were not killed. So really, there was no one left to fight. So that's probably the reason why there were no more Punic Wars after the third one. Okay, so now we've read about the First Punic War, we've read about Hannibal, we've read about the Second Punic War and the Third Punic War. What we're going to do now is add some to our notes, and this could just be added to the notes that you already have about the Punic Wars. Let me pull up my camera here. All right, so this is the notes that we already have about Chapter 4. We talked about what conquer means, what peninsula means, what formation means, and then we also wrote down what the Punic Wars were. So we're just going to add a little bit of information down here at the bottom about the Punic Wars. So I'm going to draw a little bullet point. This is just some information about the wars. The first thing is that Rome won all 3 of the wars. So all 3 of the Punic Wars were won by Rome. Okay, so that's something that's important. Another thing that was important that we read about in this chapter were the Alps, which were mountains. It was a natural barrier between Spain and Italy. Okay, so the Alps were a natural barrier between Spain and Italy. Okay, and also in this section that we read today, we read about Hannibal. Hannibal simply was the commander of the Carthaginian army. Remember, he grew up hating Rome because his dad was the general of the Carthage army, and then once Hannibal got old enough, he became the general, or the commander. Hannibal commander of Carthaginian okay. And then one final thing that we're going to write down that was kind of important is that Hannibal and his army used elephants. He used these elephants to help in battle. Right? So that's all we're going to write down today. So I'm just going to reread them. Rome won all 3 of the wars. Okay, so the first 2 wars were pretty long, and one of them lasted around 20 years. The second one lasted around 16 or 17 years. And the final war was 3 years, so a lot shorter, and Rome was able to defeat Carthage in all 3 of the wars. Second thing is the Alps were a natural barrier between Spain and Italy. And remember, a barrier is like a blockade. So these mountains, the Alps, were a natural barrier between these 2 countries, Spain and Italy. And then Rome thought that these Alps could not be crossed, but they ended up being incorrect, and they were crossed by Hannibal and his army. Okay. Hannibal, he was the commander of the Carthaginian army, and he used elephants to help him in battle. I'm going to move over here so you can see all of those words. Remember, if at any point you need to pause the video so you are able to get all of the notes written down, please do that. All right, so that is all the notes that we are going to take today.